Okay, it is my pleasure to introduce this program, Life After Pitzer, a conversation with young alumni, as well as its moderator, my favorite person on the AB, not really Tracy, Tim Campos. Tim graduated from Pitzer in 2010 with a dual major in sociology and Chicano Latino studies with a minor in studio art. Upon graduating, he worked here at Pitzer as an admission counselor, recruiting students, reading apps, and representing his alma mater while helping cultivate diversity initiatives on campus. As a student, he worked as an admission fellow and diversity intern in the Office of Admission. In addition, he was an active member of the Student Senate, volunteered as a Chicano Latino Student Affairs sponsor for incoming first-year students. He served as president of the Latino Student Union and studied abroad in Costa Rica. He is one of the original organizers of the Latino Rockabilly Festival at Pitzer, which has now become a yearly tradition. After his 3 years at Pitzer, Tim made the switch from higher ed to architecture and design. He is currently lending his creative talent to the marketing department at Hartman Baldwin Design/Build, a fully integrated architecture, construction, and interior design firm. He enjoys an active lifestyle of swimming, biking, and running. When he's not training for another triathlon, he appreciates engaging in the LA arts and cultural scene. It is my honor to introduce Tim Campos.
Thanks, Gary. Good morning. This morning, I just want to thank all the parents here today, fellow alumni, alumni board members, and also if we just give a round of applause to the advancement office and everyone involved today in putting the weekend together. All right. So this morning, I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists today. We have at the far end there, Jahan Bolden, class of 2007. She graduated in 2007 and holds a major in a degree in sociology. We then have Charlie Wood, who also graduated in 2007. He holds a double major in sociology and biology. And then last but certainly not least, we have Emma Fisher, graduated with the class of 2011 with a degree in political anthropology, honors in political anthropology, and a minor in Spanish. Yeah. So before I get into the question, I just want to go ahead and give them the opportunity to briefly introduce themselves and let you know what they're all currently up to at the moment. So we'll start with Jahan.
So I actually, I'm sure I'll go into what I've done in the past, but right now I currently work at Pomona College in the Office of Alumni and Parent Engagement. I work primarily on fundraising, but I also work a lot with volunteers and with hosting events. I live really close by in Rancho Cucamonga. I have 2 sons, and I live with my husband and 2 sons there. And I have really exciting plans to watch the All-Star events tonight for basketball for Valentine's Day.
Hi, my name is Charlie Wood. Thanks for introducing us, Tim. I am currently living in D.C. I work for Facebook in their privacy policy and privacy law departments, and I'm finishing my law degree at George Washington University. Plan on going to a law firm in D.C. after I graduate in May. And yeah, we'll talk about the 5 years of adventures I had before I started law school, I'm sure, more in a little bit.
Hi, my name is Emma Fisher, and I also live in Washington, D.C. And currently I work at an honor society and helping them figure out how they engage with companies so they can actually meet the business need of companies while also doing real social good at the same time and not stray away from our mission as a nonprofit. And kind of in that collective impact, shared value space that is, yep.
Great, thank you. So they all told you a little bit about what they're currently doing. So my first question for today is, could you kind of talk about and explain to us what was a pivotal moment at Pitzer that led you to your current career path? Jahan, you want to start?
Yeah, so actually, let's see. My freshman year of college, I had a hard time kind of adjusting to the college life at first. I took my first semester, and my advisor told me, it's the liberal arts. Take every single class you want to, in any subject you want to. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I still, think about that sometimes. So the first semester, I took a little bit of everything. My second semester, I struggled a little bit more. I took a Calc 3 class. I took an econ class. I took a dance class, and I took a teaching ESL class. Teaching ESL completely changed my life, even though everyone rolled their eyes at me for taking this class, especially freshman year at a liberal arts school. I took this class, and there was actually hands-on experience where we went to Monrovia to the Foothill Distribution Center. It's a food distribution center. And we taught English to women who decided to come to learn. Nobody was paying them. Nobody forced them to come. They were just really excited to learn English. And it actually showed me how education can be a source of empowerment for a lot of individuals. I went to a public school, and some people graduated, some people didn't. It was not necessarily, I wouldn't consider it an empowering experience for a lot of people. But seeing the enthusiasm when I was teaching English, it was really transformative and showed me that education can be a source of empowerment for anybody. If it's done in the right way. So I continue to teach ESL throughout college, and went into teaching after that and have been in education ever since. So that's kind of my path.
So I think for me, it would be the time I spent on the Judicial Council. I was in the Senate while I was here, and I think coming out of high school, I was kind of a little bit in a turbulent time. I was kind of going through my own development and figuring out who I was and what I wanted to do. And coming to Pitzer, one of the biggest things that was important to me was developing my sense of what justice meant. And being on the Judicial Council was one of the steps that being in a community and having a community decide what the standards that the community was going to live together under and how we were going to manage together. And that really, just like Jahan, in terms of an experience bleeding into other experiences in my life. After that, I traveled the world working as an activist. I've been a teacher, trying to impute those values into children. And even in the space I'm in now, even though I'm working at a pretty big corporation, I come to, one of the reasons I chose to work at Facebook is I was working in immigration in the Senate, and I got to work with Facebook on comprehensive immigration legislation, and I needed to find a place that also felt like it had a sense of justice in whatever corporation or company I might work for as well. So I think that experience was a really important experience for me here, being on the Judicial Council.
I think the pivotal moment for me was when I figured out what I wanted to write my thesis on. I wrote it on the role of teachers' unions in education reform. And I was just really fascinated by the fact that history is really made by people and people making choices, and the idea that some people didn't necessarily have a spot in the policy conversation, so groups organized and made a spot for themselves at the table. And in writing that thesis, I started learning about what other countries were doing with the education policy space, became very interested in what Korea was doing, applied for a Fulbright there, lived in Korea for a year, worked with the Korean government, and then that took me to the White House and in Washington, D.C. And just writing that thesis and really figuring out that history is really made by people making decisions and getting people around the table talking about the same issues. And I think that thesis and just meeting with my professor and him asking questions like, so what? So I'm interested in education. So what? You're interested in this. So what? And it's really helped just asking myself every day in my career, so what? Why does that matter? Why should people care about it? That was a really important part of my Pitzer experience.
Thank you. I want to go briefly introduce Amy Jasper, class of 2010, who's joining us this morning. She majored in political science with an emphasis on public policy and sociolinguistics. Amy, if you could just take a moment, let us know what you're currently up to in your life. Brief introduction.
I'm currently in traffic. I'm very sorry I'm late. I apologize. I was driving in from West Hollywood, which is where I live and work. I work for Rally, which is a public issue advocacy firm. I've been there for about a year now, and I'm very happy there. And we work for nonprofits, foundations, individuals of high net worth who want to make social change using campaigns that have a communications component. So I work personally for the Smart Tech Challenges Foundation, which is a foundation created by Silicon Valley billionaires who basically reacted to everyday gun violence in America and the Sandy Hook school shooting, which I also worked on. I worked on the Sandy Hook Promise Group, which is the parents of those children. So the foundation was born out of trying to foster innovation in firearm safety technology, which doesn't exist yet. So that's what I do on a daily basis.
Thank you. We're going to actually move on to the next question, and we'd like to know, as a student, what was something that you wish you had known while at Pitzer as a student? Anyone like to start?
Sure, I can start. So I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, and I was not expecting California to be as different as it was. And so just kind of, I wish I wouldn't. When I first got to Pitzer, I was a little culture shocked, and I really threw myself into the classes. And it was really when I became involved on campus in the clubs, with working in the admissions office, working in student senate, that I really found my place at Pitzer. So I still went to classes and I still participated and obviously did my homework, but kind of focusing less on just the classes, but seeing how it applied to my life at Pitzer and the community and what I did. So, and once I learned that lesson after freshman year, that was.
I think this is a bad question for me because I'm pretty happy coming into Pitzer and experiencing things, and I think that's the way that I've looked at things after Pitzer, is not necessarily thinking of what I should have known or what I wished I had known, but coming in and I think Pitzer encouraging me to fully experience things and to change my mind frequently, and still thinking about changing my mind maybe next week or next month or next year. So yeah, I don't know. For me, maybe I was pre-med. Maybe I should have realized I wasn't going to go to med school and taken a few less math classes.
So I'm going to put in a shameless plug because I'm a part of the alumni board. But I wish that when I was in college, I had known about all of the alumni that were available to us that are excited about reaching back and helping out students, especially toward the end of the college experience, but even helping out throughout the college experience. It's being a part of the alumni board. I've been a member since about a year and some change ago. And I didn't know about it as much before, and being a part of it, it's actually really inspiring to see how many alumni are so excited about getting involved in students' lives and getting involved in helping them out after college. So wish I had known that, and now you can spread that to your students.
I wish I had known what employers find valuable when they're trying to hire someone. That's totally serious.
Yeah.
It's not your GPA or what classes you took. It's just not. And so figuring out, I bounced around a little bit. I had a Fulbright year, and then I got hired, and I decided to move on. Then I hated that place, decided to move on. So I got hired 3 times in basically 2 years, and each process was different. But what my employers or the potential employers were interested in was not papers I wrote or professor relationships. It was, well, what did you do and what did you accomplish and what can you do for me? And that is not the perspective that Pitzer is very nurturing and wants you to grow, and it's just not like that when you're trying to get a job.
Thank you. So the next question, we'd like to know what were some of the challenges that you faced as a student here at Pitzer or even post-graduation? And again, feel free, anyone who wants to start first.
I had a challenge. I had a challenge while I was at Pitzer. It had nothing to do with Pitzer, but I had my junior year, I studied abroad, and then that summer I traveled all over the world and went to just a lot of different places. And one of the places I went to was Canada. And when I was in Canada for a cousin's wedding, I ended up getting shot in the leg and shattering my tibia. And the doctor told me not to go back to college that year because I was going to have a really hard time processing things and all that, but I really wanted to graduate with my class. So I went back to college. I was in a wheelchair for a while and then on crutches for a while. And that was a huge struggle for me. For me personally, it was a really big struggle. I didn't process a lot of the stuff that I needed to process because I was trying to avoid it and focus just on college. Pitzer, what I realized after I graduated, well after I graduated, especially talking to my husband that went to a different college, was that I would have never been able to do that and graduate with my class and with my friends if I hadn't gone to a school like Pitzer. Because I had people helping me in all kinds of ways. There were no seniors were living on campus at the time, but they got me housing on campus. I didn't have a computer, so they helped me back and forth to the computer lab. They lent me an electric wheelchair when I needed one. There was so much support that I got, not just from faculty and staff, but also from my friends at Pitzer. And I realized that those relationships are they're the most important thing, especially thinking about coming back to campus. The place actually changes so much, especially Pitzer has changed so much. All of our old dorms are gone. But the people are they're always there, whether they're on campus or not. They helped me through a lot in my life. So that's my biggest struggle, but Pitzer helped me through it in a big way. So I'm really appreciative for that.
I guess I can go. I guess one challenge I faced once I graduated was, I guess in DC, if you say something like you know what and you have this conviction that you understand what you're saying and you're saying it, people will believe you sometimes, and and just say it like you mean it. But at Pitzer, it seemed like people were like, well, what evidence do you have? And just having that constant dialogue and questioning why you believe what you believe and can you prove it, and coming to terms that that's not necessarily the real world. And I mean, the world, it's just different out there. So kind of adjusting to that frame of thought and mind was a little bit challenging at first. Yeah,
I have kind of a follow-up on that, I guess. It's hard for me to think of like a specific event or some major, huge challenge. I mean, I'm sure there have been. Maybe I'm just blocking them right now. But I think it's more, I came out of Pitzer with a ton of idealism. I came out of Pitzer ready to go and take on the world. And in some ways I have, and in other ways I've had to make compromises. And I think that has been hard. I mean, maybe that's just part of growing up. But I found ways to make change within small communities and within the places I live and the people that I deal with on a daily basis. But sometimes, and in some ways, like work towards the long goals. And maybe work inside the system when you came to Pitzer and you're like, I'm going to take down the system. And the system's kind of hard to take down. And maybe you work outside the system and you realize maybe it's not as effective as maybe working to affect that change inside the system. So I know very big and esoteric ideas here, but I mean, that's, yeah, I think that probably was a running challenge that I'm dealing with, so.
I don't have a great answer to that. I didn't get shot or anything. So I don't.
All the more power to you.
Thank you. Do we have any current Pitzer students in the audience today? Raise your hand. Because the next question is actually towards current students. What is a key piece of advice that you would give to current Pitzer students? And again, no particular order here.
Go, no, you go.
Yeah. I'm going to keep on not giving the answers that parents want. But I mean, I think it's more just be completely open to opportunities and continue to work really hard. You don't realize, it's really hard to be here and realize how lucky you are to be in this space, in this community. It's so beautiful. There's so much intellectual, like amazing activities that are happening. There's so much support. You can pretty much, if you put your mind to it, do or get funding or, I mean, go wherever you want. So take advantage of that, but don't be too worried about forming some coherent path or story that's going to lead to some career or some job or some future long, faraway goal. But just be passionate about what you're doing on a daily basis, and those things will come naturally. So,
I guess, so when you get your internships or you get your first job or what it is, keep asking to help, especially when you're first starting out. Like, show up a little bit early, stay a little bit late. Before you leave, ask your boss or supervisor, do you need help with anything else? And if there's interesting meetings that are happening around the office, ask if you can sit in on them. And yeah, I'll take notes. And by doing that, I got in a lot of rooms that I probably shouldn't have been in, especially interning at the White House. But because I was an intern, and they needed somebody to take notes and synthesize ideas, and because they didn't have time necessarily to do that, just by asking if I could sit in the room. And just, I really encourage you. People don't say no that often. And if you find somebody on LinkedIn that you find has a really interesting career path, ask them if you could set up a phone call with them or have a coffee if they're in your area. If you show interest in what somebody's doing, they're more than people don't reach out all that much to people, I guess, and really don't be shy, I guess, when you do get an internship and your next job. Yeah.
So I'm going to tag along with you and say something that's not very exciting for parents, probably. But this is what I say to all of the students that I work with, having been somebody that just turned 30. I'm no longer in my 20s. I'm officially an adult. You're not an adult when you're in your 20s, and you don't have to be, and you will have responsibilities, and you need a place to live, and you need to eat something every once in a while. But just enjoy your 20s in the most that you possibly can. I had kids when I was 24, which I love my children, but I wouldn't advise doing that when you're 24. I think it's great to wait till you're 30, because you're never going to get to be as selfish as you can be when you're in your 20s. It's your first time that you're away from home. You're making a little money, even if it's only a tiny little bit, you're making some. Hopefully you have an independent place to stay, and you can just live and do things that you love. So travel, explore the places that you want to explore. Just exist in the world in the best way possible, and feel free to care more about your career when you're in your 30s. And if all those things that you're doing in your 20s are leading up to a great career, great, that's amazing. You get to do both. But don't worry so much about, is this going to be my long-term 25-year career right out of college? Just make sure that you're really enjoying yourself. So that's my biggest piece of advice.
Mine would be to... it's hard to give a nutshell version, but basically, I think it's very easy to feel like a very big fish in the small pond that is Pitzer. I think, especially if you're active on campus, maybe 500 people know your name and say hi to you and think you're just awesome. And your professors, you said something smart in class today, and your professor was like, yeah, that's awesome. And then I think that's a great thing, because it's a very fostering environment, nurturing environment. It's been a challenge for me to enter into workplaces and get critical feedback from people 20 years my senior, because I just have not been used to it. I got very used to it, and it's something that I continue to struggle to be okay with, to not take criticism personally. A lot of times it's my work, Oh, did you think about changing your perspective and just making it more like this? Have you thought about that? I think my first job out of college, I was like, what? Don't you know who I am? I was like the commencement speaker at Pitzer College, for the student, it was just not a comfortable thing for me. And that qualification means absolutely nothing, maybe outside of this room. And I wouldn't say that I have a problem with authority, but it was just it was hard not to take that stuff personally. And so I continue to read a lot about and continue to try and be purposeful about being self-aware and having like this growth mindset that says, I'm 26 and I need to get better and better and better at everything I'm doing. And it's not good enough to just do my best and then send in your paper and you get a grade back. That's not how work product work. That's not how modern workplaces work. So figuring out ways to be okay with that is probably the critical thing that in a workplace teaches you and that you need to be able to be successful.
Thank you. And the next question is actually not to current students, but Pitzer parents. If there's a piece of advice you would give Pitzer parents, and let's keep this one a little short just so we can make sure we cover all of our additional questions.
I have one. I think that if you're a Pitzer parent, and I have parents, so I can relate. I think that it's very easy to want great things for your kid and to want them to be happy. And I think that it's been difficult for my parents to realize, and for just a lot of people to realize, probably the determining factors in what makes your kid happy is how cool of a person is their boss, how happy is their day-to-day. And I think that when I have kids, I need probably to remind myself, I'd rather have a kid who has a great boss and a positive work environment in the city garbage collecting department than working in the White House if they're miserable about it every day. So just keep that in mind.
I would just say let them do what I just said in my previous question. But also, this is not really a piece of advice, but something that I learned is that when your kids have their own kids, they're going to be a lot nicer to you and understand a lot more what you went through.
I don't really know how my parents made it through kind of all the struggles I had here and there, but I think just be there on the other end of the line when your kid calls and be supportive of them as they find their path. And sometimes maybe give them a kick in the butt. Don't always be there like with a check or with a place to live or something like that, because sometimes that's what we need to motivate us to move forward.
My mom always kind of emphasized there's like 3 circles. So you have something you're really passionate about and love more than anything, and then you have something that you're exceptionally good at, something that you do naturally, that you do really well, that you could naturally kind of develop that, and then you have those 2 circles, and then you also have a 3rd circle, find a way to get paid to do the first 2. They're your economy, and then you they call it the Hedgehog Theory. So my mom was always just kind of asking questions and trying to think about, this is stuff that you really love to do, and this is something you're really passionate about, and how can you kind of do both? So that was some good advice she gave me.
Great. Just switch it up a bit. Now I just actually want to know, can you tell us a bit about your study abroad experience, if any? A majority of Pitzer students here do study abroad. So I'd like to know, and for the audience, what was your study abroad experience, and how did that influence your current career path, or while you were at Pitzer, both personally and professionally?
I could take that, yeah. So I spent a semester on the exchange in Adelaide, and then I ended up staying for another 9 months in Australia and New Zealand. And that was a huge influence on me. I mean, that's when I decided, I came back, I had 1 semester left. I finished my thesis in microbiology and decided I'm not going to go to med school. And then I took a job where I'm from, Chicago, and then ended up spending 3 years in Central Asia, South Asia, the Middle East. So that just sent me into orbit about being able to experience new cultures and be around new people, learn things about myself that I think are really hard to learn when you're in a place that's really familiar or comfortable for you. So study abroad, for sure.
Okay, so I studied abroad first semester sophomore year. Like I mentioned earlier, freshman year I was kind of figuring things out. And I studied abroad in Pitzer program in Costa Rica, and I figured out a lot of things I didn't want to do. I loved my host family, and I wanted to learn Spanish, so I went there. But I also learned that rural life is not for me. I learned that I didn't want to go into biology, and I'm really glad I did it. And it was really hard, but it more of checked off boxes of things that I could feel pretty confident I don't want to do. But I did come back with a really strong Spanish language and some friendships and host relationships with some host families that I still have.
I studied abroad in Morocco, and it was a phenomenal experience. In fact, I just saw my homestay brother in Washington, D.C. last month after 10 years of not seeing him. So I'm still in contact with my homestay family. I had a pretty unique experience because a lot of people thought I was Moroccan, and I got to blend in a lot of places. And also there was the flip side of that, which was that they told me, don't worry about getting your visa, it'll be totally fine, because they had a bunch of American students come, not get a visa, and leave and had no problem. I, on the other hand, look like I'm North African, so I couldn't leave the country and was going to get detained and had a really big struggle with that. And actually, during that process, met a lot of amazing people who had been trying to migrate and trying to leave sub-Saharan Africa and go to Europe. And it gave me, it actually hasn't impacted my career yet, but it impacted my life in a huge way. It gave me a window into this world that I didn't really know as much about, and also helped me understand the value and the privilege of an American passport, and the kind of injustices that a lot of people face when they aren't just happen to be born into this country. So it gave me a lot of perspective and really changed my view of the world and the life that I live and the lives that others around me live. I don't have a lot to say about how it impacted my career, but it totally transformed my life. And I highly, highly encourage studying abroad, and especially studying abroad, like Charlie said, somewhere where you don't necessarily feel comfortable or you're not familiar with, because it gives you a very unique perspective that you wouldn't have otherwise had.
For me, Pitzer was instrumental in setting me up with 3 abroad experiences. If you're sort of broadening your definition a bit, I did the Pitzer in Parma, Italy program in my junior year, which was just incredibly pleasant and wonderful. It's just a very Italian, smallish city. It's like the Portland of Italy, and it was just a wonderful thing, and I would love to go back to Parma someday. The big learning experience there was basically culture shock, and I did not blend in Italy. Pitzer was also just absolutely instrumental in helping me win a fellowship at a think tank in Dublin for the summer immediately after that. It was there's a European Union Center housed at Scripps College, but all 5 Claremont College students could apply, and I won it the second time I applied. So Nigel Boyle was absolutely instrumental in setting me up with that. That was an amazing experience. I got to work with EU policy analysts all summer in Ireland. These very exciting proposals going on all the time. It was incredibly relevant all the time, and it was very fun to work with all of these young Irish lawyers who would call up Brussels and yell at them in French because of something that was going on. And then Pitzer, I didn't understand that part. In Pitzer also, I took the Fulbright seminar in my senior year, and Nigel Boyle again, and the whole Fulbright infrastructure here got me a Fulbright scholarship to Cyprus, where I spent an amazing year there. So I don't know, I can't think of another college that would have set me up for 3 really high-quality international experiences within 2 years. I could go on and on and on about those.
Thank you.
Pitzer was great.
Now for the next question, I'd like to hear from the panelists, if you can tell us about what you were involved in while you were at Pitzer. Things like, mentor program here on campus is pretty big, Student Senate, Kahootek, Music and Arts Festival, things of that nature.
I'm happy to start. We all have our long list. I was active on Student Senate until I ran for student body president and then lost. So I decided to become the leading muckraking journalist at Pitzer College, which was how I spent the majority of my senior year. And that experience, running a news blog for campus, I was the only Pitzer news source that year with any regularity. I was blogging 5 times a day, every single day, really wrote thousands of words, pretty obsessive about this blog. And that, I would say, is the single most valuable thing that I ever did at Pitzer, that in terms of setting me up for a career and helping me figure out what I wanted to do for a living, which was communications, making social change. I was a first-year mentor for 3 years. That was also a big part of my Pitzer experience. Emma Fisher doesn't remember this, but I was your first-year mentor. I did other stuff. Those are the big things.
So I also have a long list. I was an RA my sophomore, junior, and senior year in Meade, which was awesome, and I hope they never tear it down. I was a co-president for the Muslim Student Association for 2 years. I was I think I was treasurer for the South Asian Student Association. I'm not South Asian, but they thought I was, so we went with it. I was involved in almost every ethnic organization that we had on campus. I was a part of the LSU. I was a part of the Latino Student Union. I was a part of the Pan-African Student Association. I was a part of the Middle Eastern. We developed actually a Middle Eastern student group called Ittihad. Anyways, I could go on, but there are a lot of those. I was also a discussion group leader on campus, working in the study abroad. Well, working with Todd Sasaki, I'm not sure exactly what department it was, but I was a discussion group leader every summer, and I worked 3 jobs. I worked at the Coop Fountain at Pomona, and I worked 2 jobs at the library, and I also volunteered as a dance teacher down at Pomona in Pendleton, and volunteered as teaching ESL, as an ESL teacher in Ontario.
Okay, so for those of you students out there that don't have a list that long, I'll be more encouraging. So I played rugby. I was on the student senate for a couple of years in the judicial committee, as I mentioned earlier. I was also on the residential ad hoc life committee before we all had all these beautiful dorms, and we lived in a little, like, popcorn-ceilinged little hovels. And I got my LEED accredited professional certification. I was interested in green building at the time, so I helped with some of the kind of vetting of the architects for the initial dorms. What else did I do? I was a tutor at Keck, at the science centers. I think that might be it. So you guys, don't worry if you're not doing all these things.
Still a pretty good list. So I was involved in Student Senate. I was part of the external studies, or I was an external studies senator, and then part of the faculty executive committee at my senior year. Worked in the Office of Admissions and was a lifeguard manager there, and did some volunteer work with prototypes.
I was a lifeguard too, but I don't consider that an activity. I was laying by the pool. That was the best job I've ever had.
It was a good one.
Pitzer student looks like.
But time management, yeah. I'm figuring out the schedule, man. Yeah. So I guess that's my little list.
Well, now we're actually going to open up to questions from the audience. So would anyone like to start with any questions for our panelists today? Yes, in the back there. So for those of you who might not have heard, the question was, how did you choose your study abroad experience?
Moving to California, I realized really quickly that it was really important that I learn Spanish. And I chose my program in a place where I knew I could really learn Spanish.
Los Angeles?
Yeah. Well, I lived here for the other part. Right.
So it was a pretty big financial burden for me and my family to come to Pitzer. So I had taken a bunch of AP classes, so I was going to graduate early. So I needed to take, and I was double majoring, so I needed to take science classes in English because I didn't have another language that I could take microbiology classes in. So I chose Australia mostly for that reason.
I studied in Morocco because, one, I wanted something that was sociology-based, so it was academic. The choosing was based on academics, but also because I wanted to hone in on my Arabic skills, and I had already lived for a little while in the Middle East, and I wanted to explore North Africa. I'd never been to Morocco, so.
I just knew I couldn't hack it at these other study abroad programs, like Nepal and Ecuador. I just knew, it's like, oh my God, give me something easy. So I signed up for Pitzer in Parma. Parma, Italy, between Milan and Bologna. That's the safe choice.
Not that it's necessarily an easy program.
It wasn't. It was very rigorous, and my Italian is fair, and I traveled a lot and totally got, compared to sort of the comparable like big school study abroad in Florence or Milan, where it's basically like being in New York or like Barcelona or something. It was an incredibly culturally rich experience. It just wasn't like we didn't hike K2 or learn Arabic or anything like that.
Thank you. Next question from the audience? Yes, in the very back.
How did you utilize the Career Center here during your time?
How did you utilize the Career Center?
Actually, I've always really had a hard problem with, thinking about it, interviews were a really big problem of mine. So the Career Center did a really good job. They set up a video camera. They asked me a few questions. They videotaped me, and then I had to watch the tape back. And since nobody was really in there, I could go in whenever I wanted and kind of work on that. So they were really helpful in that regard.
Yeah, I hope no one from the Career Center is here. I don't think I ever went to the Career Center while I was at Pitzer. So.
I did go to the Career Center. I don't think I used it very much. I went, but I didn't do very much with what I went there for. But what I did use a lot, and I'm excited about the kind of new developments in the Career Center in the last couple of years, and continuing improvements. But what I did use a lot, which I thought was really awesome, was Nigel Boyle and the class for the fellowships.
Yes.
I thought that was a really helpful class. And I actually encourage, whether or not you're applying to fellowships, basically they help you put together your application for fellowships. So a lot of it is based on the fellowships that you're applying to, but it was just helpful in terms of putting together a resume, putting together cover letters, understanding how to kind of sell yourself in that way, and having a class based on that is incredible. So it's a really big resource. Another piece of advice to current students.
To a large extent, Nigel Boyle is my Career Center, even to this day. I remember I tried to make appointments with the Career Center to go over my resume, and they were like, sure, just come on in and we'll go over it. I never got around to doing that. I did use the, I think it's called Pitzer Link, which is a listing of all of these Claremont College job openings and fellowship opportunities and internship opportunities, and I remember spending a lot of time on that, and that was very helpful. I don't know if that still exists. It was helpful in getting a landscape of like what was out there, and there were certainly a lot of things that I would have never known about if not for that. So I would recommend that if that's still at the Claremont colleges.
Thank you. Next question? Yes.
My daughter, who's not here, thank goodness, because otherwise she'd say, Mom, why are you asking? She's in her last semester here, and my question is, were you really nervous or stressed out in your last semester about what you were going to do right after graduation? And how did you spend your time during your last semester as far as that process of considering what you would do right after leaving Pitzer?
I didn't know what I wanted to do. And also I had the broken leg situation, so I knew that even though I applied to a lot of the fellowships, I actually knew I wasn't going to be able to take them because I had surgery in June after I graduated. But I didn't know even where to start when it came to applying for jobs, so I didn't apply to any jobs. I applied to fellowships in Teach for America, and I ended up getting Teach for America in April. I don't remember being stressed out about it, and maybe because I thought, oh, it's okay, I'll just run off and be a dancer. But I don't remember it being a big stressor. I don't know, you guys.
I went to a lot of career fairs and just started talking to people, and kind of looked for, I was constantly just trying to talk to people and taking advantage of the career fairs, LA's there, and talking to professors and especially my advisors, seeing where they thought my strengths were and help me flesh out some ideas I was having. But because I guess of that fellowship class that Nigel Boyle had really, I did get the Fulbright, and so I guess at around March or April, my nerves eased.
I'm stressed out now thinking about it. I'm not joking. I can feel my blood pressure. I spent the last semester of college totally hustling the best I could to apply for things, send my resume out. I had this ritual every single weekend, sometimes Saturday and Sunday. I would go down to the village, bring my laptop, go to whatever is that French cafe there, and just spend 4 hours there sending out resumes, like creating cover letters, the whole 9 yards. I had nothing planned for my life until 10 days before commencement. And then 2 things happened. One, Fulbright finally let me know, great, good job. And then 2, as my roommate's boyfriend was helping her pack up her dorm, he was talking about this internship that he was doing at the ACLU of Southern California. And I was like, what? And he got me an internship at the ACLU that summer immediately after college, which set me up for the 2 years I was employed there right after Fulbright. All of the time I spent in the cafe eating croissants and lattes and just pounding away at monster.com or whatever I did totally did not do anything for me. It was networking, which I should have been doing the whole time anyway, which is sending notes to people who I thought had interesting careers, asking for openings, having coffee with people, reaching out to human beings instead of sending pieces of paper out into the universe. That's what made the difference for me. And in fact, that's how I've gotten every job ever.
Yeah, I agree. I actually, when it comes to giving advice to students, I think that's a really, really, really good point, especially in a time where you have thousands and thousands and thousands of college students graduating that all have leadership positions and have great careers and great kind of backgrounds, but you're just kind of on the same scale as them without any real work experience. So knowing people is so helpful. And I hated the word networking when I was in college because I thought it was so prissy and like, ooh, you think you're so hoity-toity. Yeah, like you're using people. But it's all it is relationship building connections and relationships with people so that when you're in a position, you can help other people out, reaching and helping out, fellow Pitzer people. It's not as scary or bad and evil as it seems. And it's something that, don't use the word networking with your students because they'll probably feel the same way. But just contacting people is the best way to do it.
And I think that's something that parents can really do. I think that's a great role for parents to take, asking your networks, hey, asking your colleagues, your employees, everybody you know, do you know of any open positions for a graduating college student, and can I introduce you to my kid in a professional way? If you can do that in a way that doesn't make your kid uncomfortable, your network is a million times better than your students, which is terrible. So please help them out that way.
Yeah, or in contacting the alumni board people, because we're always ready to help.
So my story, not necessarily that interesting, but I would follow up on the points about kind of advice. I think that's probably more useful than talking about my individual circumstances. I do hiring now for Facebook in some capacity, and I would strongly recommend offering your students to read over their resumes and cover letters for tailoring to the jobs that they're actually applying for. I see thousands of resumes on certain pushes, and it's amazing how many people just go immediately into the garbage because it's like they didn't even think about because they were sending 1,000 resumes out to everyone and they weren't thinking about. It's really intimidating and hard to tailor your resumes and your cover letters and everything to these jobs you're applying for, but it's extremely important because if you don't have that person that you know that's flagging your resume, which happens in real life, that's one way you get there. The other way is tailoring your experiences to be able to show that you are going to be a good candidate for the position.
So I want to go ahead and thank our panelists today. If you can give them a round of applause.